Hello, I'm Susan Woods, your Black Lives Matter fraud investigator. Thank you for your time. I'm continuing with the series in which I am examining the 2020 Form 990 information return for the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, Incorporated. I am analyzing or examining each section of the Form 990, one section at a time. In this section, we're going to talk about Part 1, the summary. So let's do this. First, I want to remind you of the definition of a Form 990. The Form 990 information return, or Form 990, is an annual report. The IRS requires all 501c3 nonprofit organizations to submit to provide information about revenues and expenses for the prior year. The type of Form 990 nonprofit organizations submit depend on the type of nonprofit organization you're operating and the amount of revenues and assets the nonprofit organization has on record. Form 990s are due by the 15th day of the 5th month after the fiscal year ends. For example, if the fiscal year ends on December the 31st, then a Form 990 is due by May the 15th the next year. The primary purpose of the Form 990 is to demonstrate transparency and accountability. If the nonprofit team fails to file the Form 990 for 3 consecutive years, the IRS automatically revokes the 501c3 nonprofit status, and you will have to apply to earn the status all over again from the beginning. So that's the Form 990. So let's talk about the Part 1 summary. That's the focus of our conversation today. The section is entitled Part 1 Summary. And I am identifying the red flags. I'm not going to talk about the entire section here. I'm just going to talk about the red flags that I've identified. So, number 1 says, briefly describe the organization's mission or most significant activities. Heal the past, reimagine the present, and invest in the future of Black lives. So let's look at some of the red flags I've identified. The first red flag I've identified is from line number 3. Line number 3 says number of voting members of the governing body. And this is referenced again in Part 6, line 1A. But here it says 1 voting member. So in 2020, Patrice Coolers was the only person serving on the board of directors of a $90 million nonprofit organization. How is that possible? How is that sensible? So that's a red flag for me. The second red flag is for line number 5, total number of individuals employed in the calendar year 2020. 2 people, 2 employees to manage $90 million and everything that goes along with that. That's a red flag for me. The next red flag is corresponding to line number 8 in the revenue section, contributions and grants, $76,872,002. Well, according to what the team Patrice Coolers reported in the 2020 impact report, $90 million was generated in 2020. So that number in line 8 of $76,872,002 is not accurate. And then the next red flag that I've identified is from line 15 in the expenses section, and that is the $245,839 for salaries or other compensation and employee benefits. That can't be right when it was determined that the board secretary, Shalamaya Byers, received over $2 million for the work he provided as a consultant through his consulting business. So How can it be $245,839 when only one person alone earned $2 million, over $2 million? So these are the red flags that I've identified in part 1, which is the summary section of the Form 990 information return. So let's summarize part 1 summary. Again, on page 1, the number of voting members are not adequate from line 3, so that's red flag. That's a red flag. Number of employees not adequate. Line 5, that's a red flag. The contributions and grants do not equal $90 million. That's a red flag from line 8. And then salaries and compensation doesn't include the $2 million the board secretary or consultant received. And that's from line 15, a red flag. So the total red flags for part 1 summary is 4. The cumulative red flags so far is 8, because in the heading section we had 4 red flags, and in part 1 we have 4 red flags. So far there are 8 red flags, and we are on just page 1 of the Form 990 information return. The next thing we're going to talk about is part 2, the signature block. But before I let you go, I want to introduce you to the Form 990 information return instructions. So let me pause just for a moment because I want to talk about the instructions, because it's important to know how to get to the instructions and why they are important. So I'm going to demonstrate to you how to get to the instructions for a Form 990 information return, so that if you're looking at an information return and you need help interpreting what the questions are, you can always go to the instructions, because the instructions provide explanations of each and every line of a Form 990 information return. So let's say that you are examining an information return and you want to know what a line means. You will go to irs.gov, where I am now. You will click on Charities and Nonprofits. You will scroll down and you will click in the section Annual Filing and Forms. Click on Find Filing Forms, okay? And then you will scroll down, and this is just my way. Of course, there are several ways to do this, but this is just my way. And then I scroll down and I click on 990 series forms and schedules. So I click on that. And then we have required filing Form 990 series. Scroll down, and we're looking for instructions for Form 990. As you can see, there are different types of Form 990s, but I'm going to click on instructions for Form 990 because that's the Form 990 that that the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation used. So let's click on that and just scroll up. And this is the 2022 version, because it's going to have the current version on the irs.gov website, but you can locate the 2020 version. But it's basically the same information, just a little bit amendments here with what's new. But I like to just go here and let me increase the size just a little bit. I like to go to the instructions just to make sure I understand the question. So you can scroll through and you can get to the parts that we just talked about. And that way you would know, okay, you want to get to the specific instructions. And we talked about the heading yesterday or in the other video. So if I scroll down, the next part should be part 1 summary. And like I said, every line is described or defined, or you learn how to complete every line here. Now I have found the instructions for 2020. If you want to know exactly the instructions that they should have used in 2020, well, I found that one. And you can find it too on the irs.gov website by just asking or searching for archived Form 990s. But again, I just think it's important to have this information so that you can investigate whether or not the questions were answered appropriately, because again, the Form 990 instructions tell you how to answer the questions. So it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, and again, here's what we talked about today, part 1 summary. All right, well, that's it for this investigation. This is part 1 summary examination of the Form 990 information return submitted by the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation in 2020. I'm Susan Woods of Susan Woods Nonprofit Solutions and your Black Lives Matter fraud investigator. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day.